Hey, it's Emma here from Women's Health and Hormones. Today I want to talk about how to balance your hormones naturally so that you can ovulate when you have polycystic ovarian syndrome. I treat lots of women in clinic who have polycystic ovarian syndrome, and for women who don't have children yet or who would like more children, ovulating and regulating their cycle to improve their fertility is a really important issue. There's a few tips I want to discuss with you, and a lot of them come back to the underlying pathophysiology of polycystic ovarian syndrome. What causes it in the first place? The first thing I want you to know is that it is a genetic condition, so you need to have a hereditary predisposition in order to develop polycystic ovarian syndrome. That link, or that familial link, it seems to be quite clear in all of the research that's investigating the underlying basis of the condition. So if you don't have that genetic predisposition, it doesn't really matter what you do. You won't end up with the condition. However, you might end up with something else. So we've all got our genetic health weaknesses. There seems to be an evolutionary basis for this genetic predisposition for PCOS. One thing that we know is that in times of famine and high stress, when a lot of other women would stop ovulating and their bodies would no longer allow them to reproduce, for women with PCOS, their fertility actually increases. And I think this might be part of the underlying basis for the genetic predisposition for the condition. So if you have PCOS and you're wondering how you can balance your hormones naturally so that you ovulate and can improve your fertility, the first step is really looking at insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is a state within the body where your system becomes less sensitive to insulin and your body needs to release more insulin in order to regulate healthy blood glucose levels. For women who have that genetic predisposition to polycystic ovarian syndrome, we now think that this is the underlying trigger that causes the hormonal imbalance in the first place. So if you have polycystic ovarian syndrome, you want to try to support healthy blood glucose regulation as much as possible, because that can help to control that underlying mechanism that will allow your cycles to come back to a normal, regular pattern. There's a few tests that can diagnose insulin resistance: fasting glucose test, fasting insulin test, and also the oral glucose tolerance test. Some women who only have a fasting glucose and fasting insulin test can sometimes miss that diagnosis of insulin resistance. The research is now telling us that the oral glucose tolerance test is a pretty good marker for insulin resistance for most women who have polycystic ovarian syndrome. So you can talk to your GP about organising those tests. If you find out that you do have insulin resistance, there are some really important strategies that you can utilise to support blood glucose regulation naturally, which in turn will help to support your hormonal regulation and allow your body to ovulate. Looking at lifestyle first, as we always do, exercise is so important. Exercise is fantastic for improving insulin sensitivity. There's some really interesting research looking at the impact of resistance training exercise on insulin sensitivity and insulin resistance. And it's really clear that resistance training or strength training can help to improve insulin sensitivity. So definitely look at heading into your local gym or seeing a personal trainer and getting a weight training program sorted out for you. If you do weight training 2 to 3 times a week, it can really help to improve insulin sensitivity. Any other type of exercise you do will be beneficial as well, even if it's just brisk walking. It's something that you enjoy. Try to find ways to move your body that you actually enjoy, because that'll help to keep you motivated and inspired to keep going. Any exercise is great, but resistance training is specifically fantastic for improving insulin sensitivity. Nutrition's also important. It's very helpful to have a small serve of protein with all your snacks and meals. That will help to keep your metabolism up and slow down the release of glucose into the bloodstream. Having low G on carbohydrates can also be really helpful. Trying to minimise your intake of processed carbohydrate-containing foods or simple sugars as much as you can, but whole grains are great. Legumes are a great source of whole grain carbohydrate, or not a grain, but low GL carbohydrate. So legumes are good for you to include in your diet, and grainy breads, or if you're going to be having breads or other types of grains, make sure they're grainy. The grainier they are, the better. The lower GL. And low GL carbohydrates, great for supporting healthy blood glucose regulation. Try and include a broad range of foods in your diet, but really focus on green vegetables. Green vegetables are a fantastic source of phytonutrients and antioxidants that we know can support both healthy blood glucose regulation, but also hormonal balance. So optimizing your intake of green vegetables is fantastic. And look at other foods or spices that you can include in your diet as food as medicine. We know cinnamon is a fantastic spice that you can include in your diet that will help to support healthy blood glucose regulation. So even just including 1 teaspoon of cinnamon per day in your diet, fantastic thing to do. You could put that in a smoothie or just include it in, if you're having porridge for breakfast, example, you can sprinkle it on top of the porridge. Great thing to include with your breakfast. When we're looking at supplements, there are a few supplements that are great too, both herbal supplements and nutritional supplements. Chromium is a mineral that's got a lot of great research and evidence supporting its use in the management of issues with blood glucose regulation and insulin resistance. So chromium would be a good one to look at. We already spoke about cinnamon. Gymnema is another fantastic herb for supporting blood glucose regulation, and even cacao. There's some really great research looking at the impact of cacao on healthy blood glucose regulation. Just remember, cacao is also quite high in caffeine, so if you're using it as part of your diet, food is medicine, try to make sure that you avoid having it in the evening. It'll disrupt your sleep patterns. Have cacao earlier in the day if you can. There's another fantastic Chinese herb which is called philodendron. Philodendron contains really high levels of a phytochemical called berberine, and there's also some fantastic research looking at the impact of berberine on insulin resistance for women who have polycystic ovarian syndrome. So that's another herb to look into. Can't really use that one as food as medicine. You'd need to take that as a therapeutic supplement. So insulin resistance and treating insulin resistance is a really important part of controlling the underlying mechanism in your body that's preventing ovulation. So if we can control that, getting your ovulation happening more regularly is much more likely to happen. There are some other herbs that we can use that support ovulation for women who have polycystic ovarian syndrome. There's a fantastic herb called Bulgarian tribulus. There's a lot of research looking at the impact of Bulgarian tribulus on the reproductive cycle. And we now know that if you take Bulgarian tribulus on days 5 to 14 of your cycle, it can help to trigger ovulation. So for women who are having a cycle, but it's just a really long cycle, maybe the cycle is stretching out for 45 days or 60 days, taking the tribulus on days 5 to 14 of the cycle will really help to improve the regularity of your cycle and the regularity of ovulation. It'll help to give you a really good strong ovulation, which will assist in improving progesterone production in the second half of your cycle, and it can help to bring the cycle length back into that 28 to 32 day cycle, which is much better. And if you're trying to conceive, the more opportunities you have over a 12-month period to conceive, the better, the more likely it is that it's actually going to happen. There's also some research looking at the impact of using Bulgarian tribulus in conjunction with a medication called Clomid. Clomid is also an ovulation inducer, and there's some fantastic research indicating that if you use Bulgarian tribulus at the same time or in conjunction with a Clomid, ovulation statistically is more likely to occur. So Clomid is prescribed on days, normally days 1 to 6 or 2 to 6 of the cycle, and then you use tribulus on days 5 to 14. When you're looking at tribulus, it's really important that you use the right type of tribulus. So if you go into the pharmacy or the health food shop and you try and purchase tribulus over the counter, you don't know what part of the globe it's coming from, you don't know what part of the plant has been used to manufacture the product. There's really strict guidelines looking into the research of tribulus and PCOS, and you want to make sure that it's Bulgarian tribulus and that it's high potency and that it's coming from the right source. So you need probably best to see a practitioner to work that one out, a naturopath or other healthcare practitioner who specialises in herbal medicine and PCOS. Lots of women find that they gain weight as a result of the disruption to the endocrine system that occurs from PCOS. Like I said before, that evolutionary process means that women who have that predisposition to PCOS and we're in a famine state are more likely to ovulate. We now know that even reducing your body weight by only 5% can be enough to trigger ovulation and the return of regular cycles for some women who have polycystic ovarian syndrome. So if you've gained weight as a result of your PCOS and you know that's part of the picture of what's going on, even just a very modest weight reduction of 5% of your total body weight can be of great benefit. So don't feel that you need to lose 10 kilograms or 15 kilograms or 20 kilograms in order to get your body back into balance so that you can ovulate. If you're significantly above your most healthy weight, that may be helpful, but even a very modest weight reduction of only 5% can lead to significant health improvements, particularly for fertility. So consider that. Very helpful to also reduce your exposure to xenoestrogens. Xenoestrogens are synthetic estrogen mimickers that can disrupt your own hormonal regulation. Xenoestrogens are found in chemical exposure, herbicides, pesticides, BPA in plastic products. These are the most common sources, even environmental pollutants. When we're looking at your diet, one of the best things you can do to reduce your exposure to xenoestrogens is to try and make sure that any animal foods that you consume are certified organic. Herbicides and pesticides get concentrated in saturated fat in animal foods, and there's not much you can do about that. So the best thing you can do is try to make sure that those foods are certified organic. If you can make your whole diet and your lifestyle certified organic, that's amazing. But at least with fruits and vegetables, you can wash them, you can peel them. There's things that you can do to help to reduce the herbicide and pesticide residue, where with animal foods, that's very difficult. Try and make sure you choose glass food storage containers and stainless steel drink bottles. Avoid plastics, especially plastics that don't say no BPA. If the plastic food storage container doesn't say does not contain BPA, it basically means it does contain BPA, and we want to try and minimise your exposure to that as much as possible. Plastic film or cling wrap is another source of BPA in our diets. So if you're using a microwave at all, which I don't recommend, but some people do still use microwaves, the most important thing you need to make sure of is that you don't use cling wrap to cover the food in the microwave. If you heat cling wrap or plastic film, the BPA leaches straight into the foods that you're consuming. So you want to avoid that, heating cling wrap or plastic film as much as possible. And if I was you, I wouldn't even have it at home. If you don't have it at home, you're not going to use it. So just don't buy cling wrap, use other food storage containers. The glass food storage containers are fantastic, they're really great. Final step or trick in how to balance your hormones naturally so that you can ovulate when you have PCOS is to support the pathways of detoxification in your body. You really want to focus on promoting healthy gut flora. The bugs in your gut help your body to digest foods, absorb nutrients, eliminate waste products, and also eliminate excessive hormones from the system. And we know that high levels of circulating hormones are one of the markers of polycystic ovarian syndrome. So replenishing those healthy bugs in the gut can really help to prevent the reabsorption of hormonal metabolites from the bowel back into the bloodstream. You want to make sure you're supporting the phase 2 pathway of detoxification through the liver as well. So again, it's another good reason to minimise your exposure to chemicals, but also alcohol, cigarettes, caffeine. All of these products utilise the same pathway of detoxification that your body requires for hormonal regulation. Your body will downregulate the detoxification of hormones if you're exposed to other chemicals at the same time. So if you can give your body a rest from the other chemicals, your system will naturally upregulate the detoxification of hormones, which is fantastic for women who have polycystic ovarian syndrome. Making sure that you include plenty of brassica vegetables in the diet is really important too. So when I was talking about insulin resistance, I mentioned green vegetables. Don't forget the brassicas like broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, broccolini, kale. These types of vegetables contain a phytochemical called indole-3-carbinol, and indole-3-carbinol helps to support that P2 detox pathway through the liver. So including those foods in your diet is really beneficial. Just make sure you cook them rather than consuming them raw. If you consume those vegetables raw, it can really slow down thyroid function. And the last thing we want to do is fix one problem and cause another. So there's some simple strategies that you can bring into your lifestyle, your diet, but also using food as medicine and some supplementation to help to restore both healthy blood glucose regulation and hormonal balance to support your body's natural healing processes, to in turn stimulate ovulation and get your cycles regular again. I really hope this information has been helpful for you. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks so much and bye for now.